Welcome to today's I4 Energy Center seminar. My name is Gaiman Yee. I'm the Technical Director of the I4 Energy Center. Also want to welcome those that are viewing today's seminar on the internet. Today's speaker is Chris Jones. He is a research associate at the Renewable and Appropriate Energy Laboratory and a doctoral student in the Energy and Resources Group at UC Berkeley. He also currently serves as Program Manager at the 2011 Behavioral Energy and Climate Change Conference. Nice big conference that's going to be in Washington, D.C. End of November, early December. It's a three-day conference plus another day for workshops. Yep. And his primary research interest is in the fields of industrial ecology, environmental psychology, ecological economics, and climate change policy. He is the lead developer of the Cool Climate Calculator. It's an online tool that allows households and businesses to estimate their complete carbon footprints and compare the results with similar users. Chris holds a MS in Energy and Resources and an MA in Latin American Studies, both here at Berkeley, and a BA from UC Santa Cruz. So let's welcome Chris.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Well, thank you, Cayman. I really appreciate it. I thought I would start out with a little antic, a little warm-up here. So sorry for the video people. Follow me around here. So this does not apply to those of you on the fourth floor I4 Energy floor. Every dollar that we spend releases CO2 to the atmosphere, right? For manufacturing products, refining, transporting them, and so forth. So I would like the lucky winner of this beach ball will answer the question, how much CO2 in dollars is occupied by this beach ball? I actually blew into it here, so it's some CO2 in there. So how many dollars worth of CO2, of an average dollar that you would spend on an average product, how much CO2 is in this beach ball? $1. $5. No? Regular, well, it's CO2. How much CO2? I heard $5, $1. So every $20 you spend produces about that much CO2. Anybody else?
8 cents.
Who said 10 cents? I don't know, you're sitting next to a bunch of I4 Energy people. I don't know if that really counts. Okay, you said 8 cents, but 10 cents is the correct answer. Give me a hand, everybody. So on average, every dollar you spend is 10 beach balls. So every $10 lunch you might spend would be an average of 100 beach balls. Now you could get the 20 beach ball lunch, or you could get the hamburger, which might be the 200 beach ball lunch. And if you get it for free, of course, this is all on CITRIS, so it's their carbon footprint. No, responsibility, that's a good, important question. So today I'm going to be talking about quantifying carbon footprint reduction opportunities. That's really boring. What I really want to talk about is realizing those opportunities. So we're going to talk about some life cycle assessment work, some online carbon management tool stuff that we've done, and other work that we do at the Renewable and Appropriate Energy Laboratory. But really, we want to start talking about behavior change. And this is leading up to the Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change Conference that Gaiman mentioned, which is November 29th. We'd like to have a good Berkeley contingent there and other UC campuses. So if you want to learn more about that, please speak to me or Carl afterwards. Anyway, I thought we'd start out with one more exercise here, though. So a lot of our work is life cycle assessment. So we do a little group exercise here. We have a typical shirt. I didn't bring a shirt in here today as an example. I could have given away an old smelly shirt of mine or something. So a carbon footprint of a shirt. What goes into a shirt that would result in a carbon footprint? Cotton. What else? Transportation. Sweatshop labor. Okay. The sweat, yes. And the carbon footprint is sweat. It's the food, I guess. Fertilizer, good. Manufacturing in general. Energy for manufacturing, for example. What else was that? Yeah, all the machinery right, from the farm, also in the manufacturing. That's right. Disposal, right? Water for irrigation for the crops. That's good. So here's some examples that you guys already just mentioned. So if we want to do a life cycle of this shirt, we might go back to the company, and we might find out what are the inputs to production, and we might look at the agricultural fields for the cotton or the polyester. We may look at the fertilizers, which you mentioned, the pesticides that go into, say, producing the cotton. You mentioned the energy that goes into the processes. We're going to look at the energy. And we might look at, of course, obviously, how the energy is produced and kind of go back a few different steps. You can see that this is kind of labor intensive. If you really want to get a precise estimate of what the carbon footprint is of this particular shirt, then you have to take all the emissions and allocate them to that one particular shirt and not to something else that factory was making. A couple things you guys didn't mention, but which may also be important, right, are the dyes and chemicals that go into the coloring of the shirt. Then if we really want to do a comprehensive job, we want to look at the factory itself. So what about the carbon footprint of manufacturing the machinery? The carbon footprint of the building that we're all sitting in, for example, today, or any building. Is that part of the carbon footprint of the product? I would think that it is. And you could even look at, if you can go back a step further, looking at the office paper that was used by the company that makes the machinery, that was used in the factory, that was used to make the shirt. And then you could look at not only the office paper company, but then you could look at their air travel that was required to market the paper that was used by the manufacturers of the manufacturing equipment that was used to make the shirt. You kind of go on and on and on and on and back indefinitely. And so when you're doing a life cycle assessment, you typically need to, well, you always have to define your system, and at some point you need to draw a boundary around your system. So this stuff can get really complicated and frankly tedious and really pretty boring. And we do a lot of this work because it's important. And I just want to show you some results, not some results, but at least the methodology we use with PG&E. I just got back presenting them the results of this study today. And PG&E was interested in learning the carbon footprint of its entire supply chain. So every single product that PG&E uses in its buildings, for its services, in its operations of its transmission distribution system, all of that. They wanted to figure out what's the carbon footprint of everything that we purchase. And then they wanted to identify the hot spots in their supply chain to figure out, where these reduction opportunities might be, right? So what we did is we did a comprehensive kind of life cycle assessment study for them. And so that's what they want to know. They want to know, here's PG&E. This is their helmet logo here. They want to know, what is the carbon footprint of PG&E? So let's think about the whole thing. So a typical way a company might do that is they'd do a process-based LCA. They would do what we just talked about. You identify what we think are the largest components of that product, and then you go to different databases and you try to figure out what the appropriate allocation of the emissions to those individual components are, and you end up with kind of this incomplete picture here. You may not even know, difficult to see even what the entire picture looks like based on these little pieces, and that is doable, and that's a lot of what people do. Another approach is to use economic input-output life cycle assessment, which is an approach, also another approach that we use. And that is based on industry averages. And so what you do is you add up all the dollars of all the different categories of purchases that a company makes, or an individual makes, or is used to make a product. And you figure out, let's assume that the dye that we purchased is average dye. We know all the emissions from the dye manufacturing industry on average, and we know how much dollars we spend on dye. And so then we also know that through input-output assessment, through economic information, all of the emissions from their supply chain, and we get this kind of average industry-wide estimate. And we get this kind of fuzzy picture. We basically take PG&E's supply chain data on how much they spend, and we apply these averages. We get the kind of this fuzzy picture. But the nice thing here is it's a complete picture, right? Because we include every single dollar that PG&E spends. So do that. typically then what you would do with a hybrid LCA is you would take this picture and you'd try to use input-output data to kind of fill in missing pieces. I'm not going to go back to, the manufacturing of the building, but maybe I'll just, kind of get some rough estimate there and kind of piece in a little piece. But what we've done through this hybrid top-down approach is we start with our fuzzy piece, and then we kind of fill in the areas with more detail that we deemed are necessary or most interesting to look at through our kind of hotspot analysis. And so that's the type of approach that we've done here. We've also done that same approach for UC Berkeley. And we have an undergraduate student doing her thesis right now, Kelly Doyle, who is helping us revise this for UC Berkeley to figure out the entire carbon footprint of UC Berkeley, not just our energy that we use and our transportation fuels and so forth, but also look at the entire carbon footprint of educating, for example, people and producing research here. So that's the type of approach that we use. And again, we get this kind of different picture here. So I have one other beach ball here. And probably do one more quiz. So this is a primer on the type of life cycle assessment work that we've done. But what we really are interested in doing is changing behavior. So a lot of life cycle assessments have been done using different methodologies for different products. And what we want to look at is what are the alternatives. Where can we substitute one product, for example, for a less carbon-intensive product? And one that comes up really often, for example, is food, right? You guys are all eating food here. And so one of the recommendations that comes up really commonly is, again, not fourth floor people here. Don't even look at your neighbors if you're fourth floor people. Okay. I'd like somebody to tell me the answer, the first person to tell me the answer. Which has a lower carbon footprint? Food, organic produce, or conventional produce? Just first one. I hear organic. I hear conventional. Anybody else? The same. Who said it depends? Thank you. We have a winner here. Woohoo! That is right. You're on the fourth floor. That doesn't count. You can't do that. So the truth is, well, how about this? We'll just bat it around here and somebody. Get it? There's 10 cents worth of CO2. But you got to hold on to it. Oh, Joe, okay. Joe can keep it. That's right. The correct answer is, we've looked at a lot of different studies, tried to do a meta-analysis, and we found that half the studies we've looked at show that organic has a higher carbon footprint, mainly because it has a lower yield, and half of the studies say that conventional has a lower or higher footprint, and there's really no conclusive evidence on that one. In fact, some studies that have looked across a wide variety of products have found that some products are higher and some products are lower, even using the same methodology. It depends on your analysis. It depends on the product that you're talking about. So it really does depend. But if we're trying to get people to change their behavior, we often want to focus on just one or two things that we think people can do. And the question is, are we focusing on the things that really matter? Are we focusing on the things that are really going to lead to meaningful changes in our carbon footprints? And of course, we have to make some pretty dramatic changes, right? So I'm going to be talking more about household carbon footprints today. This is the carbon footprint team at Rail. Rail, of course, as many of you know, is directed by Dan Cameron. Professor Cameron, I think, did he make it today? He's around today. He's been at the World Bank for the past year doing their renewable energy plan for the bank. And he's been on this stage presenting that recently. We have a number of graduate students here. Some of them are in the room. And staff. Mia is in the room. She's on staff. And some undergrads. So we kind of have a team of people who've been working on these issues. So I'm actually presenting results for our team today and some results from some other studies as well. Okay. So here are just a few projects. I hope you'll allow me to just really briefly mention in maybe perhaps one sentence these projects that we're doing. Just kind of have a breadth of idea of the types of things that we deal with. A lot of it, what we've been doing for the past 5 or 6 years is developing online carbon management software. We used to call it carbon footprint software, and now we're really working on the decision support side. We've been doing these for households. We've done it for quite some time. For small businesses, we have a tool that helps businesses also quickly estimate their carbon footprint and then direct them to the things that could reduce their carbon footprint, also compare themselves to other similar businesses. Same thing we do with households. We're developing a tool for the Air Resources Board for local governments. It's a local government decision support tool that Hazel Onsrud is working on. She might be here today. And so the idea is that we want tools that are sophisticated, transparent, user-friendly, and ubiquitous. We want tools that are free, accessible. This is not information that people should have to pay for to get these kind of basic carbon management tools. And we're also developing them for schools with stopwaste.org. And we're working in some social networking features, and we're realizing, of course, that behavior change has to do a lot more than just providing people with information, but that alone is not enough. I mentioned the carbon footprint analysis that we're doing on supply chain analysis. And then we have a number of other projects. Joe Kaltenbacher has been working on this Greenpoint rated calculator for residential building construction. I'm going to talk a little bit about this community challenge. We're have a project with the Air Resources Board, really focused on behavior change, to get individuals and businesses in 3 communities in California to engage in a carbon footprint reduction competition. And we're in the stages right now of selecting those cities, and the idea is to get the entire community to work towards a common goal, and our job will be to quantify the emission reductions from initiatives across the cities and to make these move way beyond carbon pledges to make the actions that people are taking social, to make them visible, and to engage the community around this issue in a meaningful way. So we're doing a pilot project over the next 2 years, year and a half on this. I mentioned the Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change Conference. It's going to be in Sacramento next year. It's always my favorite conference of the year, and I'm really pleased to be involved with that. This year and next year as well. I highly encourage you to come. It's kind of the premier behavior change science, behavioral science, and practice conference in the U.S. And it's a lot of international expertise of that as well. And we've done a few other projects. I won't mention them further. So I'm wearing a couple hats today, Rail and also CoolCalifornia.org. And this is a project of the California Air Resources Board. Lawrence Berkeley Lab is involved. The main partners are UC Berkeley, the Air Resources Board, Next 10. We have the Energy Commission and a number of other institutions on board. When the California set its emission reductions targets through AB 32, they identified households and small businesses as early action targets. We know that technology is going to take time to implement the technology at the scale that's needed. In the short term, behavior is something that if we can convince businesses or households in some way that it's in their interest to lower their carbon footprints, that's something that we can realize reductions today using given technology. So they developed this website, CoolCalifornia.org, and it has tools for households, for businesses, for local governments, and for schools to calculate their carbon footprint. And now cities are going to be required, and at this point, they're being encouraged to calculate their carbon footprints. And we can talk about different methodologies for doing that. And then get these tools and be able to share their results on this online system. So this is the slide I usually start out with, and it's the one. It's one that people always remember. It's the only thing they perhaps remember of my presentations. But this is the carbon footprint of the typical U.S. household. But before we get there, I realized I have another little bit to do. So thank you all for composting your food today. And as part of the Sutarjadai composting initiative, there is a place where you can go online and take a pledge. And the URL, Jason, for that is tidyurl.com/sustainablelist. You can tell that Jason Traeger came up with that one. Anyway, you go there, and you can take a pledge. And we also give recognition for 3 people a week who have taken that pledge. And so, Mia Yamauchi, would you stand up, please? And Danny Wilson, if you're here. And also Domenico, just to wave, tell everybody I'm a champion. Gosh, you know, you took the pledge. Thank you very much. Everybody give a hand for me. Okay, you just proved behavior change is possible. And of course, if you don't want to stand up next time and get publicly humiliated, maybe you won't do what I said. But I happen to know that Mia likes it. Okay, so this is the carbon footprint of the typical U.S. household. And here we include, what I mean by that is the greenhouse gases required to produce everything that the typical household consumes. So we don't leave anything out. We really want to go for that comprehensive picture. So the blue are your direct emissions. Those are emissions that come out of the tailpipe of your car and natural gas when you burn it in your home. Electricity, of course, is an indirect emission source, right? You're not physically burning that fuel. The electric utility company is burning that fuel on your behalf and producing emissions on your behalf. We also have indirect emissions, of course, from air travel, from the production of the motor vehicle fuel itself. We call those well-to-pump emissions, manufacturing the vehicle, maintaining your vehicle. You could also include on here the roads and maintenance, government emissions, which we have not included, so we're not fully comprehensive yet on this one. We're getting there. Waste and water, construction, we call that housing. And then all that yellow over there is indirect emissions from goods and services, and particularly food. You'll notice that shows up quite high. I don't know why that still says snack food down there. It's actually kind of anything that doesn't fit into those other categories. But meat and dairy are very large sources of emissions. So when we're trying to identify places to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from individuals, it, I think, makes sense to focus on the things that matter the most. And a lot of times we'll focus on one piece, for example, your building energy, which is really important, but we may kind of forget about the other pieces which may be more important. Now, when I said you're going to remember this slide, it's really not this piece that people remember. It's actually this piece. This is a representation of the global average footprint, and it's also a representation of where we need to get to in California. It's our target. Our 80% greenhouse gas reduction target is going from something that looks kind of like this, it's a little less, I'll show you that later, to something like this. Now, that's the typical global average today. So on average, if we looked at the average household globally, that's where they already are. So we're just trying to get to where the average is today. On average, if everybody lived like this, we'd have a really equitable planet, and maybe someday by the time we reach this level, the other countries that are below this level may finally arise to this level of emissions. And when that magical day finally happens when we meet our reduction targets, and if we have this equitable world, that would be the existing emissions of greenhouse gases. We need to get 80% below that in order to stabilize the climate. And I would argue the United States needs to get even below that, or even get to net negative emissions by investing in other countries, because we've already done more than our fair share of emissions. Perhaps you could take that argument. So we have a long way to go. And the question is, if we're focusing on individual action, if we think that's important, or we're thinking of action for businesses or for policy, it's, I think, important for us to focus on the things that are going to make a significant contribution to the problem. A lot of people, it's good to get their foot in the door, perhaps by thinking about, I'm doing organic. But are we really focused on the things that are really important? So that's a lot of the work that we try to do. Here's, by the way, the typical US footprint. Here's California. We looked at all 50 states, and I'll show you in a minute. We looked at a number of different cities as well. Let's go back here. Sorry for those of you who have seen this before, because I always do it. US, and here's California. What happened over here? Electricity. We have relatively clean sources of electricity here. We're also more efficient about the way we use it. This is only electricity itself. from a household perspective of the household's carbon footprint, the electricity they consume in California is only about 5 or 6% of their carbon footprint. If you ask people what percent of your carbon footprint is your electricity, most people would say, I don't know, all of it? A lot of it? A big part of it? It is an important part of it. But in California, transportation really stands out as the one where we have not done nearly as much work. And if we can take the lessons that we've learned and continue to learn in this area and apply them to this field, and also food, by the way, you'll notice that food itself is much larger than household energy. Household energy is important. It's a way that people can actually save money and reduce their carbon footprint overall. But in California, it seems to me, I would argue that we need to be working on transportation in the same way that we've been working and continue to work on household energy. Another thing about household energy is that it gets people their foot in the door. It gets them thinking about their carbon footprints, and maybe they can now change the way they think about themselves. As they identify themselves as a person who supports energy efficiency, they may be much more likely to, as the theory goes, to do some of these other actions. Another thing to say about electricity, as a policy, it is, in California, a really important policy because there is electricity in all of these things, right? So electricity from industry and from commerce. So cleaning up our electricity grid is arguably one of the most, if not the most important things we can do, because we also need to, one of the solutions is to electrify our transportation system as well. So electricity is really important, but from a household perspective, they should be thinking perhaps about other things in California as well. Different story if you live in St. Louis. Okay, here's a typical carbon footprint. This is a coal state, a little bit different income, different transportation. This is based on survey data, so this is consumer expenditure surveys. This is actual people responding to how much of stuff they buy. And very different story, right? So the message clearly in certain parts of the country is about electricity. And so it's important to understand these carbon footprints of your audience that you're trying to address, right? So I always give this example as well. This is the carbon footprint of a typical Berkeley student. I think Berkeley students are some of the greenest, most carbon-friendly people on the planet. And of course, I've only sampled mostly Berkeley students with the tool, but they do really, really well. No, I maybe didn't get that right. Yeah. Well, there's one piece that's missing on here. Is actually the Berkeley tuition. Means your carbon footprint goes way up just by being here. But yeah.
Berkeley students are not eating much less than most other people. So why is the food so low?
Well, it's per person. The other one I showed is per 2.5 people. So sorry about that. We actually account food the same regardless of your different income levels, because what we found is that regardless of your income level, people eat about the same amount of calories from meat and from dairy from these different things. So thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, this is from a typical, well, the truth is, this is from a typical poor person. Because that really is the main driver here. I mean, in Berkeley, we do better because students don't need cars and we have really low electricity. But this is, in fact, the carbon footprint of the typical average individual making less than $10,000 a year. Pobrecitos. Okay. Well, then what happens? They go out and get a job, right? Maybe they get married. Maybe they have a kid or a couple kids, right? And maybe they move to St. Louis. So, I really love working here and working with students because they have so many ideas and so much energy, but they also have not made those choices yet that are going to influence, their environmental footprint. We obviously want to think more beyond carbon. And so they haven't kind of made these choices yet. And so it's really good to, get them to think about these issues ahead of time. So this, by the way, now is the carbon footprint of UC Berkeley. Remember I said that was the carbon footprint of a typical Berkeley student? Well, that was the one who wasn't putting their tuition into the formula, because it turns out the blue is the carbon footprint that we reported through the Climate Action Registry, not the Climate Registry. And the gray, and we do some things here that we don't need to do. We include the employee commute and air travel, which is nice. Those are indirect emissions. By the way, these scopes refer to direct emissions from fuel that you burn on site, or that from vehicles that you own and so forth. This is from scope 2, which is your energy, and we get a big hit for steam. Unfortunately, it's a byproduct of the cogen plant on campus. We get the steam to heat our buildings, but yet they charge us a portion of the carbon footprint from producing the energy. Not really fair, but anyway, it's there. And then all of this is indirect emissions. And when we did this analysis, and Dan Kamen first looked at it, it says, well, we're getting only about half of the total carbon footprint. So he's like, so I guess we got it 100% wrong. But we are starting to count it here. And at UC Berkeley, we're, I think, one of the few institutions that has been tracking this. And we first did this in 2007. But if you were to take these 400 million, 400,000 metric tons. God, I've been working with PG&E, sorry. PG&E was in the millions of tons. 400,000 tons, and you divide that by, say, 50,000 employees and students, you get about 10 tons of CO2 per person at UC Berkeley, just kind of to be here. So that 15 tons now may go up to 25 tons. And there's some argument whether or not we should charge these emissions to students or to research or to the public at large, but it's not a small carbon footprint. We looked at the carbon footprints of different income classes, and you see, we also looked at the average different household sizes. So obviously, the more people you have in your household, carbon footprint goes up, but adding one more doesn't double your emissions. And as you add more, it's a little less. Emissions go up, obviously, over income as well. Another way to break this out is to look at emissions by kind of the emission source by income. Now, the different income brackets here. I mentioned before that we model the food because we looked at this in quite some detail. The actually carbon footprint of food doesn't change based on income. The amount of money people spend on food changes really pretty dramatically. But we noticed that the caloric consumption of these different categories of food actually pretty much the same throughout different income brackets. And we noticed that these other trends also go up. And there is a significant income effect here. You have money, you're going to spend it, right? There's 10 cents of CO2. We also looked at the carbon footprints of different cities. We looked at 28 different cities in the US, and this is from a paper that Dan Kamen and I just published in ES&T. We're very happy about. And so we looked at the carbon footprints of these 28 different cities. And really the important part here is that, again, the composition of those carbon footprints really varies pretty dramatically. So if we look in San Francisco or in San Diego, a lot of it is in transportation, and this household piece is relatively small compared to some other cities where household energy would be small compared to transportation and so forth. So cities are interested in this type of analysis to get an estimate of what types of things they should be focusing on to reduce carbon footprints, not just from households, but also from businesses. In fact, I'm going to be on a webinar on Tuesday, the EPA webinar on consumption, and we're specifically going to be talking about how to do a community-wide greenhouse gas inventory that includes everything. So David Alloway from Oregon Department of Environmental Quality is going to compare their method to a method, the method that we have for calculating this for cities. Yeah, why Tampa has the lowest. A few interesting things with Tampa. You might not think it. They might have high, electricity for cooling. They actually don't have any natural gas, interestingly. So it's all electricity there. It's an income effect largely, though. Tampa has pretty low income. They don't seem to travel very much. Maybe there are a lot of retired people there. Not really sure, but we're not to the stage yet where we can actually say why these emissions. We can tell you from the data side, this is what they're consuming, but we haven't done the analysis to say why. Although we've done a new study now, which we haven't yet published, which is an econometric model that able to better tell what are the drivers of this consumption, but we can't really show that one yet. You have another question? Yeah.
Why doesn't more expensive food take more carbon to produce? Like 1,000 calories of chicken versus 1,000 calories of Taco Bell.
Well, we don't know that it does. It may. It may very well produce more emissions from Japanese food than from Taco Bell. It might be the opposite. It might be that per dollar you're talking about per calorie. So per dollar we know that Japanese is way better, right? Because you're getting much less food for your money than you are at Taco Bell. But you asked the smarter question, which is on a calorie basis. We don't know. Honestly, we don't know on a per calorie basis. What we can say is the composition of the food. So we know that a typical Japanese dinner would be perhaps not as much meat. Certainly beef is one of the largest culprits of carbon footprints. And so the composition of the food would be different. That's one of the things. Did you have some other thoughts on that? I mean, we discussed this more at length. Yeah, Taco Bell, one thing they have is efficiency. That's true. That's true, yeah. So one other thing I was going to basically say on a carbon footprint slide, it's basically cars, coal, and cows are your biggest culprits here. So coal for obvious reasons, cars for obvious reasons. Cows produce methane, and that is a much more potent greenhouse gas. Some people ask, is it better to buy grass-fed beef from a carbon perspective, or is it better to buy conventional beef? This is not my research, okay? But the last time I mentioned this, I got boos because I said this, and it's just the research, and we've seen it over and over again. And the reason, and it's true from what we have seen, this is actually, we have evidence for this one, not like the organics, we have real evidence here, that the grass-fed beef is worse from a carbon perspective. But yes, we're counting the food that the cows eat and the petroleum that's used to produce the corn and all of the inputs of production and everything. And the reason is basically that the grass-fed beef cows live longer. They live longer. It's about 6 months in a conventional feedlot versus 18 months for a grass-fed cow or so. So they're producing methane throughout that whole time. And it turns out the grass is a little bit harder to digest for some weird reason than the corn. And it digests anaerobically in their guts, and it produces methane. So, I mean, we don't want to be too carbon-centric here. There's a lot of reasons to go and buy the grass-fed beef. I don't know, carbon doesn't seem to be one of them. Yeah?
Is the extent of cost of the snack food part in the packaging?
Yes. Yep. Processing is an important part of it. And I should mention, though, that this is really other food, so it's a lot of oils and other things. But yeah, highly manufactured food with a lot of inputs from all over the world. Under different production systems, highly processed. It just kind of makes sense that a carrot is going to have a lower carbon footprint than processed carrot, for example. But yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. How are we doing here? Well, we don't have much time left, and I got through a small fraction of my slides as usual. So we're really interested in the mitigation opportunities here. So this is a greenhouse gas abatement curve. We've only looked at the things that actually save you money. So this is for the typical US household. And the important part here is that this color, whatever that is, that green kind of thing, is food. These kind of Berkeley colors here are transportation, and then the gray is household energy. The area under these curves is the total dollars that the household can save per year by doing these different things. So this is eating less food, first of all. People eat 2,700 calories or more per day when they only need perhaps 22. So we eat about 25% more calories than we actually is good for us. We also waste a third of our food. That's not even in here. but we waste a third of our food. The next thing you can do is shift from less meat and dairy intensive diet. So that's what we've calculated here. If households were to do that, they'd actually save a lot of money in addition to improving their health and reducing their carbon footprint really substantially. And then transportation and so forth is obviously another really big one. So the horizontal axis here, by the way, is how much carbon they can save in 1 year. So kind of the width there is how much carbon they can save. We looked at this for different household types. I'm re-emphasizing this point here. I'll just go over this quickly. Here we have a typical 2-person, upper-ish income household in the Bay Area. Air travel is a big one. Motor vehicle fuel is a big one for this household. Here we have a typical 5-person household living in the Midwest. Poor St. Louis, I picked on them again. So with a 5-person household, their diet is a big one here, their household energy. So they're really different carbon footprints and obviously very different greenhouse gas mitigation strategies that you might want to employ for the different households. Oh, geez, I'm sorry. Such good people there.
You don't do it by the degree days.
We do calibrate. So it's not a fair comparison.
Right. It's because it's so cold there.
That's right.
You're gonna have to heat your house 6 months out of the year.
Absolutely.
You have to cool it.
That's absolutely right.
So I have an argument with that because what is it? The degree days. You're gonna have to calculate the degree days and weigh it.
You could benchmark it on carbon footprint per degree day or something, or energy per degree day, and we do that.
We can't control the temperature there where you're living. Here you have free air conditioning. We don't in St. Louis.
Well, and it's not your fault that your utility uses coal. It's not our fault are we responsible that we don't need air conditioners because we live in the Bay Area? So yeah, we're not certainly making any judgments about the people who live in these places. We're just saying.
If you're not making a fair comparison, to me, I don't think it's a fair apples-to-apples comparison.
It is not an apple.
You do it the degree day and then somehow weigh it for that. Those differences.
Right, and we do different analysis. When we estimate carbon footprints here, we're just saying, what do you consume? That's it. That's it. We just say, what is it? We didn't estimate it through some model and then, but that's a good point. Mia, did you want to jump in on that one? Okay. Which is a hard thing for her to do. Sorry, man, I'm just really picking on you.
I prefer to leave the questions to the end unless it's a clarifying question, so we can get
We'll through it. Well, this is good that I don't have to wait for Q&A anyway so much. So this is a really interesting analysis by Weber and Matthews at Carnegie Mellon University, which I really like. This is the carbon footprint of everybody who took the consumer expenditure survey. And on the x-axis, we have their income, and the y, we have the carbon footprint. What's interesting here is that they're all over the place. They're absolutely all over the place. So you could look at the typical household, say, in this range, the $30,000 a year range, and kind of the biggest part of this trend is anywhere between 10 tons of CO2 and 50 tons of CO2. That's of 5x change in the carbon footprints, the behavior, if you will, of households with similar income. And if you go out to the furthest end, you're finding a 10x difference. And that's not just on energy use. We've seen this with energy use a lot. The differences can be even up to 20 times different in some areas, like in the Bay Area where you don't have air conditioning, for example, versus people that put it on anyway. So you find these huge variants in carbon footprints of different household types. And that suggests some evidence to me that that behavior matters, that there are options and choices that people make, and they're very, very different. Bring this study up real quick because I think it's important. This is a study that LBL and a number of other researchers did on how to get California to meet its 80% greenhouse gas reduction target by 2050. That's our goal, by the way. 80% reduction. The state has made that goal. It should be all of our goal. It's we need to reduce in the next 40 years, 80% of our complete carbon footprints. So they looked at technology primarily and enabling policy. In an update to this report, Rail and UC Davis and consultants Itron and LBNL led the study. We also added in, we updated this, and we added in a behavior wedge. And the behavior wedge is about 15, 20%. So we're not saying we could get there all the way through behavior. Obviously, technology and policy are really, really important. But in the short term, behavior has some pretty good opportunities if we can learn to do it well. Important thing about this study is to get to 80% reduction goals, we have to completely eliminate natural gas in buildings. We're building today buildings that will be there in 40 years, and they can't have natural gas in them. We have to get rid of it completely. We need to retrofit all the other buildings that use natural gas, and that's going to take a lot of time, right? Our electricity needs to be produced from renewable and clean sources, so we need to power our homes. Not only our homes, but in this study and the update, we're assuming we're going to power our vehicles completely through electricity as well. So we're talking about some pretty major changes. Here's the behavior wedge piece of it that we did. So we looked at not just the technical potential of these different behavior change options, but we looked at different studies that have attempted to implement these different policies, similar to another paper by Dietz et al. That was published last year, two years ago. And so we looked at kind of the potential of behavior change over time. This is, again, California. Home energy is this green bar at the top. Recycling is down here and reducing waste. This is just VMT reduction. And these other pieces here in this area are also transportation related, increasing public transit, eco-driving, including trucks, and a few other things. A diet is this band right here. One thing you'll notice, it has this curved shape to it. So as technology improves, by 2050, we're going to have much cleaner technology. The benefits of behavior change aren't as strong 40 years from now. Ideally, we'd like to have completely clean technology, and then our behavior wouldn't matter quite as much, right? But there is this opportunity kind of here, this sweet spot, as we ramp these projects up, and we've talked about increasing these projects over time. There's this kind of sweet spot in here where we're actually doing a lot of reduction if we can learn to ramp these projects up. So how do we do that? In a few minutes. We know that providing tailored information alone isn't enough, but to the extent that you're going to provide information to people, it needs to be very tailored and specific to them. So this is why we have dashboards and why those dashboards can be useful. They're most useful to people, though, to the extent that, one, they're interested and engaged in the issue and actively seeking out that information, and two, that you can tell them something they didn't already know. If I can surprise people, if I've surprised anyone today about what they think their carbon footprint might be, maybe to get you to think a little bit differently about which things you focus on. Comparative feedback is, these are tools, these are tricks. They're tools that we use to encourage behavior change. Tricks is an awful word. Comparative feedback, though, it makes it kind of a game. How well am I doing compared to somebody like me? Well, that's not like me, but anyway. You need to be able to set reasonable targets, but ambitious targets. So if you give people a 5% energy reduction goal, they may, studies have shown, achieve 7% or more greenhouse energy reductions. If you give them a 20% target, they may achieve 15% on average savings. So giving them an ambitious but yet reasonable target to achieve, that's really helpful. If you don't tell people how much you want them to reduce their energy, probably not, it's a good incentive for them to do it. And then giving them feedback, of course. So hold on a second. Public commitments, get them to make that commitment, make that a public commitment. We've really embarrassed Mia today with her public commitment, but it doesn't have to be that public. But getting, just telling somebody, hey, I'm going to do something is much more likely to do it than if I just make some sort of internal pledge. Oh, I think I'll compost. But if I tell my office mates, hey, I'm going to compost from now on, now I'm much more likely to do it because they made a promise to them. Obviously, we want to tap into social networks. Really, the behavior change, a lot of the work is making it social. It's almost, if there were 3 most important things you can do, it's making it social, at least 2 of the 3. And there's a lot of ways that we can do that because it's really, we are highly influenced by what our peers think of us. And we're highly influenced by even more so, what we think our peers expect of us. So, for example, I gave a presentation at PG&E this morning. If I had worn anything less dressy than this, they would think I was just some Berkeley kind of freak, right? So I'm here. I wore the same clothes today, but yet I didn't want to wear a suit here because you'd think the same thing, right? But we're highly influenced by what others think of us and how our behavior is modeled often on what we think others would want us to behave. Rewards can be important. We often focus on incentives. And the rewards can be not just a monetary reward, it can be a social reward. Getting people recognition for the things that they're doing can often be a strong motivator. And to the extent that they've made a commitment, it's good to have prompts and constant reminders. And we also have prompts back here at the composting and creating an environment which is conducive. Jason is a human prompt back there. He's going to tell you guys how to compost at the end of the day. Getting people, creating an environment that's conducive to reducing emissions is important. And giving targeted messaging is another thing. So you obviously want to, marketers know this, right? You want to segment your population. You want to target your messages, figure out what is meaningful to people. And to the extent that you can address an issue that is truly meaningful for them, and you can align your goals with theirs, so then you're going to have be much more successful. I had all kinds of other slides here on our calculator. Here's our online tool. We give you some feedback, right? You calculate your footprint. We compare you to similar households. So you're compared you to Smiley Face because you're better than similar households. We have this online carbon management tool where we rank the things that you can do to reduce your footprint, and then you can go in here and make a pledge. Then you create a profile, and you put in your zip code, and it saves all your information. So here's your profile page. Here's mine, I guess. I guess I'm an angel for my transportation use. And then we also have, so I live in Davis, a community page that compares members of Davis to other communities, and it compares members in Davis or Berkeley. Berkeley has one as well. So you can all go calculate your carbon footprint and join the Berkeley group. It compares you to all these other people in the community as well. So we're kind of moving towards those social networking tools. So we're getting better at providing information and providing tools and resources that do some of these things. But what we really realized is that these are just tools. They're just information tools, after all. And what really matters is on-the-ground programs, program development. So these are tools that can enable and help enable programs. And so one of them that we're trying is this carbon footprint competition between these 3 cities. We can also do, though, customized carbon footprint competitions between classes, between schools, and groups of friends. The system's kind of set up to do that, so you can kind of engage in those types of behavior change programs and make it fun and make it a competition. If that motivates you. Competition may not motivate you, so the collaboration part is important. I could go on and on. I think this one is about recognizing that people at different stages, you want to move them through the stages of engagement. I think maybe I'll move through just this, one more example. One example here. I'm from Davis, so I get to show off. Here's a bunch of theory, a bunch of drivers. I'll just end with this example. It's an example of a project I think is doing all the right things. It happens this weekend. It's the Davis Greatest Bike Parade. We're going to get in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the longest bike parade. And what is great about this? Well, the money that's raised is $10 or $20 or whatever to join the parade, and all the money goes to Davis schools. So what could be better than that, right? You have this community organization. It's organizing the community around a common, shared, achievable goal of getting recognition for Davis, as it's something that ties in with our identity as a bike community. We're getting this goal. We're going to get this recognition for it. It's a social event, and so you're out there, you're meeting the people that you know. Your friends expect you to be there. We're actually helping the Davis schools. We're having fun. It's enjoyable. It ties in with our kind of meaningful goals for myself and my community. And these are the types of projects, Berkeley is doing lots of them as well, that we want to encourage, and the types of programs that will be in our competition as well. I don't know, I guess I will end with that, or maybe take a couple questions.
One quick question. On Walmart, they were supposed to have a carbon footprint. They were supposed to have a carbon footprint label. Where does that stand? So when you buy a product like your calories?
Walmart's never going to do labels, in my opinion. They've said this. They are doing carbon analysis. We've worked with them a little bit, but they're really going away from the label, because the idea is the label, first of all, it's not clear what a carbon footprint is of a product, and second of all, it perhaps discourages people from buying the products.
Yeah, you said that for each person that you add to a household, it doesn't make a huge difference, but it looked like it was 5 or 10% anyway.
Right.
And each of those people is going to eventually grow up and have his or her own household. So
yeah.
I'm wondering if this whole population question is kind of the third rail of carbon footprinting. Nobody talks about it. There's nothing in your slides about changing the behavior of continuing to have children. So is anybody working on that?
Sure. I actually don't think it is the third rail, because the people who would be concerned about it are the ones that we want to have kids. Those are our future leaders who are going to hopefully have a net negative carbon footprint by doing such good work that they're going to be the ones who are going to lead us to. Well, the food, yeah, but Dan Cameron flies all over the world, to work on policy. There he is. Guys got to make fun of Dan here, but Dan, I think you've called yourself a carbon, what is the word? Pig, I think was the term. But he's doing this to promote renewable energy and energy-efficient technologies and investments around the world. So, he's the type of kid you'd want to have, right? So, I'm not sure about the type of boss you'd want to. No, I'm kidding. One more question, yeah.
So it was an interesting thing. You had these scoring systems, but they've done studies where you compare yourself to other people, and if you're doing really well, compared to your peers, you say, oh, I'm doing this too much, and you'll actually increase your usage. So the smiley face, I think, is a really good idea in that. But if you start comparing people too much, they'll either give up, or they'll say, I'm doing such a good job, I'm overextending my capabilities. And
That's absolutely right, yeah. Yeah, I think giving them people layers, giving them something more to work towards. I think stars would be better. So I've got 2 stars. Hey, 3 would be better, 4 would be better. Smiley is better as long as you've got the angel face kind of above it. And then, I don't know, something else that's beyond that. Double halo or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. Great talk. Speaking of bikes, on the abatement curve, riding a bike was a fairly small rectangle. Why was that?
Well, the fact that it's up there means it's probably large. So we've looked at a basket of options. The thing about the bike is that we selected 20 miles per week, perhaps arbitrarily, but we tried to estimate that based on what we think is feasible. So, people would typically do a short trip as opposed to their long trips by bike. Yeah. Okay.
I think we're done. Thank you, Chris.
Right.
Great talk.
Thank you.